Hello, it's Andres, and welcome to another episode of the Savvy Painter podcast. I am so happy to have you here listening to this episode. This is going to be a good one. So last week we talked about how to make art when it kind of feels like the world is burning down. And this week I got some questions. We're going to talk about how to make art when you don't feel like an artist. I'm hearing from artists who walk into their studio, sit down in front of the canvas, or pick up their sketchbook, and suddenly they're thinking, who am I kidding? Does that sound familiar? Or maybe you look around at other artists and you feel like they have something that you don't. Maybe it's more confidence, more skill, more legitimacy. Maybe you're wondering if you should even be calling yourself an artist at all. And if that is you, first, welcome. Because here's the truth. Every artist I know, yes, even the ones you admire, have felt this way at some point. Call it imposter syndrome, call it just self-doubt. Whatever it is, it's not about your skill level. It's not even about your experience. It's about how you think about yourself in relation to the world around you. And right now, I get it. I know the world is a scary place. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of uncertainty. And it feels very, very chaotic. Every time I wake up and open anything to look at the news, I'm always very apprehensive, like what happened while I was sleeping. When everything feels unstable, our brains look for certainty. And one of the easiest, most harmful stories that we tell ourselves is, maybe I just don't belong here. But I want you to ask yourself, what if that story that we like to tell ourselves, what if that story isn't true? What if the only thing standing between you and feeling like an artist is just the thought? So today we're going to break apart that thought. We're going to be talking about the myth of the real artist and why waiting to feel like one is kind of a waste of time. How imposter syndrome often means that you could be in the wrong room, not the wrong career. We're also going to talk about why external stress fuels self-doubt and how to take back control of your thinking. And most importantly, we're going to talk about how to stop looking for permission and start making art exactly as you are. So this episode builds a little bit on the last one because when the world feels this uncertain, it's even easier to doubt yourself. But here's what I need you to hear today. Nobody has their ducks in a row. Not one single artist, not one single person. And if that's the case, then maybe it's time to stop waiting for perfection and start creating anyway. So let's dive in. So I want to start with one of the biggest, I think, fallacies, one of the biggest things that just hobbles so many artists. And that is the idea of a quote unquote real artist, an artist with a capital A. If you are waiting to feel like a real artist, you'll probably be waiting forever. The truth is, everyone is making it up as they go. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the fun of it. A lot of people like to throw around this idea that there is a way that artists are supposed to be, that there is the lowercase artist and then the capital A artist. And I think that that does more damage than it's worth. When you are working on your art, when you have a vision that you are going after, that you are trying to create in your studio, when you are consistently working on your art, and by consistently, I mean you are going into your studio and working on a regular basis. For some people, that's every day. For some people, that's once a week. For some people, that's every couple of weeks or every couple of months. That is still a consistency. And the thing that I think is so destructive about this idea of the real artist with a lowercase a and a capital A is that everybody likes to put things in boxes and they like to make rules about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. But what gets left out of that is the long-term lifespan of the artist. And so what artists tend to do is they will take a snapshot of a very small period of time in their art practice, in their career, and they're not taking into account everything else that's going on around them. And they are using that as a weapon against themselves. And so I really advocate that you dismiss all of that and just accept that you are a real artist. And that if you feel like you are not working in a way that you want to, that's a different story. Or if you feel like you're not working enough, like you would like to work more, that's a different story. For both of those, what I see happening so often is that artists will make this blanket statement like, I'm not working enough, or I'm not painting enough, or I'm not selling enough. And there's zero detail in there. So we don't even know what that means. And the artist doesn't even know what that means. They just accept the idea. So if the sensation, the feeling that you have or the thought that you have is centers around anything like that, then I would highly, highly suggest that you make it specific and understand that it's not a law. There's no law in the universe that says that an artist has to work this number of hours a week or a month, or that an artist has to achieve this particular thing by this date or this age or this decade in their career or anything like that, right? That is how it gets used against you. And what's helpful is to see all of that as, oh, this is something that I want. I'm responding to this. I'm having these ideas because I have this desire. This is something that I want. And then if you know that that's something that you want, then you can make it specific. So an example would be, when an artist decides that they're not a real artist because they don't get enough hours in the studio, what I see is, okay, what you're telling yourself is you're beating yourself up for having the desire to paint more. So let's talk about how much you would like to paint. What is that number of hours? Let's try that on. Let's see if that works in your schedule. Let's see if that works in your life. Right? There's a lot of stuff going on in everybody's life, and that needs to be taken into context. So these are just some of the I like to get really, really specific on these things because so many artists try to tell me like, wait, you don't actually understand. I'm not a real artist because I haven't painted in 6 weeks. And they forget the fact that for the last 6 weeks, they have been caring for a sick loved one, or they had a baby. I actually had someone say that to me once. They're like, well, I haven't really been painting. And I'm like, yeah, and you also just had a baby. So we take it out of context. And of course, that is an extreme example of it. And hopefully you laughed at that, because I know that the artist that I was talking to, she laughed at it, because sometimes we just need to hold the mirror up and we need to see what's actually going on. But the point of this is to understand that when you accept that you are a real artist and you stop arguing or entertaining the idea like, am I or am I not, then you can just get to work and you can start creating your art. So I wanted to bring the big one up first because I know that this is something that a lot of people fall back on. And I've seen artists who work their butts off. They have like an incredible work ethic. They are putting their work out. They are submitting to galleries. They're getting into galleries. They're selling the work. And then something happens in their life and they have to step back or take their foot off the gas. And instead of just acknowledging that circumstances have changed and it's temporary and it is something that they will move through, they use that as a weapon against themselves. And suddenly they decide, oh, well, I haven't really, I'm not a real artist because X, Y, and Z. The truth is that everybody is making it up as they go along. There is no law that says you have to paint X number of paintings a year, or you have to be in X number of galleries, or you have to have sold X amount of paintings, whether that's dollars or physical paintings, all of it is made up. And to be honest, that is the fun of it because you get to make the rules. You get to decide for yourself. And when you loosen up and stop playing around with this idea that you're not legitimate, then you can see how making up those rules and making them fit your life and making them fit your desires and what you actually want, it's really exciting. So if you get to make up your own rules, and you do, the question that I have for you is, what is the practice that you want to create? And how do you want to feel when you go into your studio? So often this idea of I'm not a real artist, or, the capital A, lowercase a, or the imposter syndrome, feeling like an imposter or not believing that you belong in any way, shape, or form, most often happens when you are not aligned in your thinking. When people put fitting into an idea above belonging to themselves. Right. So you got to ask yourself, what exactly am I trying to fit into and why? Because from what I see from all the artists that I coach is that a lot of times what people are trying to fit into is they're not even aware of what they're trying to fit into. It's just this vague notion. And it's a made up ideal of what an artist is supposed to be. And when that happens, what you're doing is you are in somebody else's story. So, of course, it's going to feel off. You're playing somebody else's character. Not intentionally, of course, but that's what happens when you adopt unexamined ideals about who you are as an artist, who you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to do, what you're supposed to know by when and how much, and how your success is defined. When you outsource those, you are living in somebody else's story. If the story you are telling yourself is that you are in somebody else's world, whether purposely or not, for example, that could be the art world, that could be the gallery world, that could be the quote unquote successful world. There are all sorts of worlds that artists believe that they should be a part of. And as long as you're playing a part in those other worlds, you're going to feel like an imposter. And I know, I can hear some of you screaming right now, like, but there is the art world, and there is the gallery world, and there is this world, and there is that world. When the assumption or the inner belief is that it's not your world and that you have to somehow perform in those places in order to be accepted, that's what I'm questioning. And that's what I want you to question. As an alternative, what if you leaned into the idea that, of course, there are people and circumstances that can influence what happens in your art practice, in the results that you get, in what happens with your art, but you get to make your own rules up as to how you behave and how you respond within all of that. And if you are making your own rules for you, that focus on your goals and your desires and your authentic self, there's no way you can do it wrong. It's just a matter of using your innate intelligence and creativity to take steps that you need to take in order to get the results that you want. And you get to decide within that who you surround yourself with. Recently, we had a conversation in Growth Studio on the importance of finding your people and firstly, identifying who is not your people, right? So deciding intentionally and purposely who are the people that you want to surround yourself by. What are the things that light you up? What are the things that inspire you? What are the things that get you to ask questions and that inspire you and that invoke curiosity? That's what you want to be surrounded by. Maybe you want other things. The point is to decide for yourself what those things are. And also part of that can be deciding what you don't want to be around. So maybe you don't want to be around people who are complaining a lot or people who are highly negative or whatever it is, right? Knowing what you don't want is as important as knowing what you do want. And sometimes answering the what you don't want question at first can guide you towards what you do want. I was joking around with some of the artists in Growth Studio, and there's a meme that's going around, and I don't have it in front of me, but it's something along the line of, before you decide that you are doing it wrong or you are not fitting in, first you want to make sure that you're not actually just surrounded by a bunch of idiots. So I had a good laugh about that. I think that's hilarious. But you also want to be very, very clear about what it is that you actually want. Because part of creating your work and making the art that you are here to create is feeling safe in your studio, feeling safe in your practice. And a huge part of that can be the people that you hang around with. This is why community matters so much. There's communities that you can become a part of that are online. There's local communities, and allowing yourself to feel safe and to be particular about who it is that you surround yourself eliminates imposter syndrome, and it makes creating your art so much more fun and light, as it should be. So that's one big piece of it, is deciding for yourself what your own rules are and deciding for yourself how you will show up in all of the spaces and how you will connect in all of those different places, whether it's within the gallery setting, whether it's in the art fair circuit, whether it is in any artist group. Allowing yourself to understand what are the pieces that light you up is going to go a long, long ways to making you feel safe and comfortable in there, knowing that you create your own rules and that you're not required to follow anybody else's. You decide how you want to be in those circumstances. And that's so, so powerful. Just think about that for a minute. What it's like when you go into these situations, knowing that you can feel confident, you can feel secure. You don't have to even consider the idea that you might be, quote unquote, doing it wrong. You've decided already how you want to show up in those spaces. So you go in with this knowing that you are doing it right. And I think right now we are all so much more susceptible to self-doubt and to questioning ourselves because, when the world is uncertain, our brains automatically, we look for the places where we can control things. And sometimes that desire for control turns us towards self-doubt. So what I mean by that is, there's so much happening in the world right now. And that stress that we feel from all this uncertainty that's happening in the world can amplify the idea that there is a way that we're not aware of that we're supposed to be creating our art, or that, with all this stress, we tend to be more prone to the idea that we don't belong in our own practice, right? So all this stress can kind of amplify the imposter syndrome and make us feel like we're not doing enough. Because the reason why is because the human brain craves certainty. And when we can't find it externally, we will turn inward and we will often blame ourselves. And a lot of times in an attempt to gain that certainty when things feel really crazy, we try for perfection, right? It's a misguided belief that many human beings have, is that if I can just do everything right, then everything will be okay and I will feel better. It's that false logic that leads to this idea of, if I were a real artist, I would be handling this better. If I were a real artist, I would still be getting work done. If I were a real artist, I wouldn't feel so unsettled with everything that's happening. It's also, why comparing yourself to someone who seems to have it all together is a trap. And again, I just want to rephrase this as many times or reiterate this as many times as possible so that it really sinks in. Everyone is doing the best that they can. Nobody has it all together. Everyone is just trying to do the best they can, and they're making it up as they go along. And when I say making it up as they go along, what we're really doing is we are responding to what's happening around us. So when you can accept that and that you are one of those people who is just doing the best that they can, then you can have empathy and love for yourself. And you can have empathy and love and appreciation for how you are showing up in your studio. When you can tolerate this feeling of uncertainty, then you're no longer susceptible to all the ways that we try to avoid the discomfort of feeling that uncertainty. So think about that for just a second. The better able you are to tolerate the discomfort of uncertainty, of not knowing what's going to happen, right? Which as a species, we don't like that. Human beings really don't like uncertainty. But if you can tolerate it, if you can build your tolerance and raise your threshold for your ability to sit with that discomfort of uncertainty, then all of those other things start to melt away. So all of this tendency towards perfectionism, all of this tendency towards looking to measure against how other people are doing, which really is just another way of asking the question, am I okay? Right? So comparing ourselves or ranking ourselves against other artists, then we can get back to what actually matters, making the art. And by making the art, creating a better world and just loving on all the people around us. Because the thing is that regardless of what's happening around us, we get to choose our thoughts about what is happening. We get to choose our response and our reaction to it. And if the thought is, I don't belong, then your experience will reinforce that. If your thought is, I belong to myself or I create my own belonging, then your brain is going to start finding proof for that too. And as you create that belonging for yourself, you are creating trust in yourself, right? You're creating this space where you can feel safe with your art and with your work. If you're at all familiar with Byron Katie's work, the first question she will always have you ask is when you have a thought like, I don't belong, or I'm not a real artist, the first question you can ask yourself is this true? Right? And then whatever your answer is it really true? Right? So really digging into and questioning and not just taking it on the surface level. And then asking yourself, who would I be without that thought that I'm not a real artist? Like, just imagine that for a second, what it would be like if you never, ever, ever for the rest of your life allowed yourself, or not even allowed yourself, but it just didn't occur to you that you were not a real artist. Most likely you would behave as if you were a real artist. You would paint more. You would be focused on the work that you're doing and not the validity of the work that you're doing. This is the power of questioning your thoughts and questioning what it is that you think about yourself, your self-concept in your studio. And all of this goes such a long, long way to creating an environment where you can just settle in and just be and be relaxed and be free and be comfortable in your own skin, in your own studio, right? Sit with that for just a second and just imagine what that's like, because it is absolute beauty and gold. So I wanted to create this episode because I have been hearing this come up a lot as a response to what's going on in the world right now, as a response to a lot of the chaos, and just as a response to this general sense of unease and uncertainty. I just thought we should talk about it. And I just want to remind you again that when it feels like things are a little bit off or a little bit wonky or whatever it is, and just know that everyone is also trying to get their ducks in a row, right? Everyone you admire, everyone is also chasing their own ducks. And to be honest, some people don't even have ducks. They might be chasing cats or two German shepherds. I don't know. But instead of waiting for everything to be in the way that you suppose it's supposed to be, you can allow yourself to just start making the work, knowing that uncertainty is part of the process. And you might be feeling a lot of it right now. You might not be, but uncertainty is part of our lives, no matter what. Uncertainty is part of being an artist. We don't get the crystal ball that tells us how things are going to work out. We just get to trust ourselves and enjoy the process of making the art. And that's what allows you to create even more art. And trust me, we need your art more than ever. Nobody ever feels like they fully belong all the time, right? It's just human nature. So when you start finding yourself thinking those ways, you can have some more compassion for yourself because you're not broken and there's nothing wrong with you. You are just simply behaving like a human being. However, you do want to question it. You do want to notice what you're thinking and how those thoughts are impacting your creative process and how those thoughts are impacting your capacity to go into your studio or to show your work or to submit that portfolio, all of those things. In a nutshell, I just wanted to say that your art is valid. You belong. The end. That's what I have for you this week. I hope you have an amazing week, and I will talk to you soon. Hey, if you want to take what you are learning here on the Savvy Painter podcast even further, join us in Growth Studio. This is where you will take what you've learned here on the podcast and apply it, practice it, and take these concepts from just good ideas that maybe you'll do someday to habits that become part of your practice. Growth Studio is a unique community of artists. We meet multiple times a week for live coaching, critiques, and demos. Just go to savvypainter.com/join.